Welcome everyone to another episode of the Analytic Mind podcast. I've really been enjoying speaking to all of our guests recently, and another great guest in Thomas Watkins today. Now, Thomas is the founder and I believe director of Threely. And I'm sure you can, Thomas, you can expand a lot more on everything that you do because you do some really interesting stuff and probably work with some very interesting customers, I would presume. But a lot of expertise that might not be directly related to, say, Power BI, which is where most of our listeners come from. But I love talking about things which are maybe outside of our core analytics skill set. And then finding ways to incorporate those ideas and techniques and frameworks into what we're doing. So why don't I throw to you, Thomas? Maybe you can just expand on that a little bit. Talk about yourself.
Yeah, awesome.
We can jump into it.
Yeah, exactly. So the common name for the job role that I've been told is UX for folks who work with UX folks in the office. As a professional, I like to view myself as a design psychologist. And so so essentially what this means is that we're taking what we know about psychology and applying it to technology. Just like you have, clinical psychologists who deal with mentally ill folks. You've got social psychologists who study how people interact in social settings. Design psychologists, we're taking what we know about sensory perception and cognition and engineering that into the product to make sure that it is able to resonate with users.
That's fascinating. It's so interesting to talk about such a unique topic, right? It's like talking to someone who's super specialized in medicine, right? It's like so something super specialized in the customer experience, like digital customer experience, right?
Exactly. So it works across the board. So you mentioned how the Power BI users, you're doing basically visualization, right? Data visualization and discovery and insights and things like that. That really all caters also to kind of the design psychology realm. One of the things I do as a UX practitioner is I think about probably 11, 12 years ago, I started noticing that data visualization was not in the normal skill set of UX folks. And I didn't understand why, because that doesn't really make that much sense. Now there's more to data viz than just UX. Obviously there's data science, there's understanding statistics. So sometimes that's a skill gap with folks. But one of the things that I do also as a professional is teach workshops, especially to designers and product managers about data visualization and approaching it in a way that you're communicating data in a way that really caters to how we operate. And how we sense things. And, so if you have a data set and there's things that you want to communicate, how do you put this in a way that it really caters to how people want to perceive it? So that's, I think, another, a little bit of a touch point there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I really want to dig into, or drill down into some of those ideas and techniques you have. And I can back you up on the point you made earlier where the UX and design around data visualization is not something that comes naturally to the vast majority of users who do analytical work. We know this for a fact at Enterprise DNA because we run a whole range of challenges. We've got and project-based learning experiences, and the creative side, the user experience side is almost one of the hardest things for us developers to get our minds around. And it can be quite draining. It can actually be quite draining to design something that is compelling and engaging. And so we've come up with a few ideas ourselves, but and sort of like a methodology around how you can do it in a best practice way. But I'm sure you can elaborate on that, and you can really actually share some insights into what works really well. So I'd love to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed in my career is that there's kind of three basic mentalities that I've noticed when folks approach data visualization. You can either approach it as a technologist, as a artist, or as a communicator. So from a technologist perspective, the goal is, let me just take this data set and get it visualized. Let me just get it working, right? Because that in and of itself is a big task, right? So, knowing the columns and what matches up to the way this tool wants to take it and the different types of numbers in each of the columns and all that stuff. And just getting it to work, you'll find like if I go to, I used to go to these little local events called it was on the weekend, I call it Data Jam. And it would be kind of this data visualization club. And, you'd be there in the morning, get your coffee, get a muffin or whatever. And then the group, they say, okay, here's the data set that we're going to be all working on. And then they reveal the data set and you go online and you click it and you form groups, ad hoc and just kind of start putting stuff together. And what I noticed is some folks are just like, okay, I want to get the data actually working and just render it, because that by itself is already a big challenge. That's what I mean by like the technologist approach. And that's a mindset when people approach data visualization. Another one is like an artist. And so I see this a lot from not actual artists necessarily, but a lot of managers who they want to express themselves with the data. And so they'll say like, okay, here's a data set, but you know what? I want a really cool graph. I want something that looks like this type of diagram, and you know what? We've all been guilty of this stuff, right? I certainly used to before I was into data visualization as a profession. Then there's the third mentality. And this comes from what I would call the Edward Tufte, Stephen Few approach, which is how do I communicate this data? And one way of looking at this is you're like a translator when you're doing this. You're translating the data from the language of the math and statistics into the language of the human sensory, perceptual, and cognitive system. So how do we take things that need to be gleaned from this data and encode it in such a way that it's really helping people to gain insights? And so when you approach it like that, that first helps focus our motivations and our goals and what we ought to be trying to do when we're doing data visualization, which is how do I communicate this the best way possible? And that definitely is a challenge because there's so much that goes into data visualization, as you know. Tools like Power BI make it a lot easier because you've got this apparatus. It's not like back in the day where you had to do everything from scratch. But I think that really you want kind of a team approach, right? Where you've got people with different specialties. You have someone who does focus on the data, kind of the communication side, where other folks are focusing on other challenges that are a part of that data visualization effort.
Yeah. I somewhat agree with that. One of the caveats I would say to that, particularly within our space with Power BI, is that sometimes, I would say actually probably the majority of times, the users of Power BI don't have the resources to have sort of a data engineering team and a data analysis team, data visualization team. And you've kind of got to be a jack of all trades. And on the creative side, on the UX side as well, even though Power BI has, in particular, makes it so easy to create visualization, it doesn't make it easy to create good visualizations.
That's true.
And so that is still one of the more challenging parts of developing quality with Power BI as your visualization tool.
Yeah. So and so I didn't want to go there because I know you talk about Power BI a lot, but and I don't know if there's any ties there. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not the single Power BI in particular, but a lot of the tools historically do make it actually kind of difficult to make good ones, just as you said, because I think they're catering to a certain set of desires that a lot of folks have of graph chart types that don't necessarily communicate well. Excel back in the day used to be pretty bad with this. You would add like a bar chart and then automatically you would get like all of these unnecessary tick marks on the axes. And it was just like trying to show you as much as possible. I think at one point it put like an automatic drop shadow on the bar graphs, if I remember correctly. Excel used to do. So yeah, it is challenging to actually do it well. There, Tableau, in some of these tools make it perhaps easier sometimes to to exercise good habits when you're doing data visualization. But yeah, all of that, everything that you said.
And so my follow up to that is, um, it can be done. So it can be done within Power BI, and I think
Sure.
that through a lot of examples that we've created internally, what our community creates, you can easily see that you can create really compelling UX, really compelling design. But my question is, say for the everyday user of any analytics tool, whether it's Power BI or not, what are some of your tips around? Say you have a blank canvas. What
Yeah.
are you're starting with a blank canvas here. What are some of the things that you need to think about and maybe start to implement to actually get you to a place where you're building a strong foundation for your UX design?
Yes. Okay. So let's start with dashboards and the concept of dashboards. And this is one of my main tips. Dashboard is such a loaded term. Dashboard could mean almost anything. And so oftentimes when you hear dashboard, it basically means what? It means a screen with charts on it. Right. And that's kind of is the, the working definition that a lot of people use of the word dashboard. What I encourage folks to think about is using dashboard in kind of the original sense of the word, which is a single screen that has the top level of everything that you care about. And then who is you? It's a particular job role. So a job role focused screen that has high level aggregated up to the top, all of the different segments of the major things that actually matter to them. That's kind of what I think of as a dashboard. And then there's the other screens, like so a screen with charts on it. That's perfectly a valid thing, right? But I think that when you empower people with the ability to log into a system or to first enter a system, and then the first thing that they see is the high level stuff that they care about, you're enabling them to really take charge of their data discovery experience in a different way, because you've now taken the time to surface the things that they care about. And then if you build it correctly, design it correctly, you can allow them to explore the data from there, right? So you can click on, one widget of the dashboard that shows you, let's say these are your top, 5 products in terms of sales or something. Okay, well, I want to see the whole list. So you click on that, and then you come to another screen that shows just a list of that, for example. So, but thinking from, being centered on the user, what insights do they need to have? What decisions do they need to make with data every day? And then therefore letting that guide you in your decision making about how to do the data. And then from there, allowing them to explore it from there. And there's a lot to say about how to, get it to where people can explore it. But yeah, that's kind of high level where I start.
Yeah, nice. No, those are some really good tips. And I think like one of the key things, one of my key takeaways from there is put yourself in the consumer's mind, like in their eyes, right? Don't just do it. Don't just start building something that interests you. You've got to think about your stakeholders. You've got to think about your consumers. That's the most important thing.
That's right. That's right. And here's another tip to go along with that. It is give your users a data query screen as a partner to the dashboard, because this will keep you from destroying your dashboard, right? So, so you've got your dashboard, let the purpose of your dashboard be constrained to showing the high level information, but then separately have a screen where the user is now allowed to slice and dice things and explore it in the way that they would want to explore it. And even that would be sometimes changed by job role, right? Different filters and different data sets matter to different people. So then by giving them that kind of dual ability, you can take a little bit of pressure off the dashboard to do everything. Because sometimes that's the way it happens, right? You'll say, like, okay, here's the dashboard we're going to be showing to, the salespeople or to the engineers or whatever. And then, someone in the room says, well, I think we should have information about this because that information is important. There's another area that's important. And then pretty soon you get, too much stuff either getting crammed on the screen or you've got tabs or whatever else is going on. So I think having that goal and then separating those two things out so that one doesn't overburden the other.
Yep. No, I really like that. That's a really, really neat idea. I like it. And that's actually from just a Power BI perspective, very easy to do, very easy to create a table with a whole range of slices. But you got it right there. Let the user give you feedback quickly around what they would like to see. A lot of times I hear that users still just want the table. So you're probably actually doing the favor anyway.
Yeah, they probably are, right?
Everyone's still so used to Excel. They just want tables of data. So, that can be a good value add to your report anyway.
Yeah. And another thing you might notice too, is if you give your users the ability to kind of have like a playground where they're able to create stuff, that can inform, if you're the team that's providing the users with these visualizations, you can learn from that. You can say, well, everybody's trying to make a table or a graph that does X. And then you ask them about it. And they say, well, yeah, because we need to do such and such. And so we need to see a graph that caters to that. And so a lot of times they can help be like research that you end up using to create better dashboards in the future.
Yeah.
That's what I find.
No. What are some typical sort of customer engagements that you do, and which technologies are you generally using for your customer advisory work?
Yeah, so worked on one, so one type of project might be where a company had a project a few years ago where a company had about a dozen dashboards where they built a software service, and along with it, they wanted to offer some BI because it turned out that the BI would kind of make the software service more sticky. But they generally what it was is dealing with security, software security platform, and then to get professionals to use this security platform that basically scans the software's product that you build and finds security vulnerabilities in it. And so where the professionals can go and the engineers can go in and fix it. Then a whole bunch of dashboards. And one of the first things that, I would found in that project and similar ones is that the folks left to their own devices, will make data set centric dashboards and screens. They start with the data that they have, the data that they collect, and they say, okay, this is important data. Let's put this on the screen. And they're not taking a moment to step back and say, what is the user trying to do? Why is this data important? And what you find is when you go through kind of a research process around that, and that's what we did. We ended up talking to a whole bunch of the users, interviewing them, having us show examples of the types of problems that they solve with data. And we ended up reconfiguring different types of data sets to be on different screens. And we shrunk it from 12 different dashboards to about 4 that were all centered around job roles. And per dashboard, there were different types of data sets, but what they had in common is that they catered to that job role. So for example, you might have a chief information officer who cares about high level decisions that need to be made, what's going on, right? And so what kinds of things do you provide them versus a dev manager or, an architect who needs to see maybe something that's closer to a day by day situation awareness display, right? Where you have stuff that's going on, stuff that needs to be monitored, items that you need to act on. And so when you take the time to kind of go through a research process and figure out, okay, what do people want? What do people need? Then you end up kind of rearranging, reconfiguring a lot of that stuff and really getting to something where users are a lot more into it, right? They resonate with it more. That's really what you're after.
Engaged. Just much higher engagement in say
exactly.
like the product or the output, right?
Exactly. Everybody wins when that happens.
Yeah. And what would, because obviously you do, quite extensive projects around that. What would be like a light version of that you think could be replicable in say, a more um, less resourced environment, right? Like just your everyday analytical work that someone can do. What's a really light version that you think could enable some of these techniques and ideas to enhance reporting?
Okay, so this is a good question, and I see what you're getting at is that without having a bunch of folks to come in and do research and then do this big bang boom thing, what if I'm kind of like, maybe a business analyst, or I'm, kind of, working with clients, maybe you're part of a customer success team and you're providing, these things. What are some things that you can do? I think that, even, uh, you know, booking meetings with stakeholders where you are trying to get at the answers to two questions. It's what do you know and what do you need to know? And if you can get answers to those two questions, you can get a surprising amount of, you can get surprisingly far from doing something like that. And, just by, so let's say that you, it's a, I don't know, throw a job role out there, make up a job.
Oh, just like a sales analyst, something around that.
Okay, good. That's great. Let's go with like a sales analyst, and they've got a sales pipeline, data set. They've got some CRM data that's probably streaming to this. Maybe they've got some things about the sales channels. Ask yourself, okay, so what's important for this person to know? Maybe they want to know just a comparative size of at the different steps of the sales channel, where are the choke points? Where are folks getting caught up? Or maybe they want to know, so one thing is displaying things in a way that they're more easy to comprehend. So bar charts for quantity comparisons. That's an easy one. Um, uh, you know, the obvious one, line charts for looking at trends over time. Maybe you're looking at, how long it takes or something like that for people to shift out of one channel versus another or something like that. But you want to, move away from having it be the data set centric mindset. And it's easy to do then, right? Because you're trying to be productive at work and you've got the data and you're told that you've got to put this on a screen, right? But I would say take a step back, start with a blank slate, book some meetings with your clients and just sit them down and say like, okay, what do you plan? This is the data. We're collecting a bunch of sales data or engineering data or whatever the case. What are decisions that you need to make with this? If you could look at, just a dashboard and just wave a magic wand and it just tells you anything, what do you want it to tell you? What decisions do you need to make with that? And then reconfigure things to revolve around answering and showing answers to those questions. I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice I would give. And then if you have pressure to show a whole bunch of data sets, either put it on a different screen, save it, say like, hey, okay, here's this other dashboard, quote unquote screen that it's got a bunch of charts on it. Knock yourself out if you want to see something there. But I think, preserving that kind of first screen or main screen that you've got to get value will bring a lot of credibility to your efforts. When, if you can get folks to say like, yes, I like this. I use this now every day. It helps me make decisions. That's going to be a very fulfilling experience to have, to be able to provide that for people.
Yeah, no, that's great. Some great tips. One of the key points I thought you made was you mentioned the word iterate, and I think that rapid iteration is a key goal, particularly with the versatility of a lot of the tools that we use now. It's not like you have to get everything right on the first go, right? Like it's so easy to iterate and rapidly do so. So get feedback, iterate, and you're very quick, very very quickly. I think. Particularly if you're producing a lot of reports, right? It's not just like one system you're building. It's like a whole range of different reports. You can get them updated very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that iteration is book another meeting once you've got your new dashboard with them And here's what you do. Don't say, hey, what do you think of this? So, do you think this will help? Ask them to solve a specific problem with it. They tell me about whether the marketing dollars are converting, or you ask them some question that matters to them that they really would be trying to answer, and watch them try to answer it. And the less wrapped up people are with the specific features of your visualization, and the more they kind of just dive into being able to easily analyze it, that's often a sign that you're on the right path, because you put it up and they instantly kind of even want to use it, because it lends itself to people wanting to kind of dive into it and start using it. So yeah, I think that would be part of the iteration is, kind of do that initial kind of meeting where you gather some info, some bullet points, try to throw something together, book them for a meeting again, show it to them, walk through them, and involve yourself and involve the user into what you're doing, make them part of the process like that. And, oftentimes you can get good results from that.
Yeah, nice. Now, just all really good ideas, really good points. So really appreciate your thoughts on those. I've got a bit of a different question for you. What do you think from your design psychology perspective? How important are colors and themes, and styles? How important do you think they are to an engaging UX experience?
So I think that colors have a great capacity to help insights and to hinder insights. Color, you want to use it in the right way. When you show colors on a screen, colors, one thing that colors do is they promote categorical perception. So if things are not in different categories and they're not different types of things, and you're just coloring them in, you may be adding confusion. I think I would encourage folks to think about it in terms of this. Data visualization can be thought about in terms of signal and noise, right? So some folks might be familiar with this idea of the signal detection theory, right? And that's what that means in this context is that for everything that you see, every bit of visual data on a screen, that is either part of the signal or part of the noise. And of course, what you want to do is you want to reduce the noise and you want to boost the signal. One of the ways to do that is to try to make sure that things only vary from each other. Things only differ from each other when it maps on to actual meaning. So you don't want to have, if it's just a bar graph where you're just comparing like 5 different categories of things, don't put them in 5 different colors, because what you're doing is when someone looks at that, their brain instantly goes like, okay, what do the different colors mean? And if all they are, it's just 5 different colors and they don't really map onto meaning, you're introducing noise, because it's some kind of thing that's different on the screen, but it's not different in reality in the way that it's implying that it's different. So, I think, and so when it comes to now, why do folks put lots of colors into things? It's because they want it to look good, right? Nobody wants an ugly dashboard. They want a nice looking dashboard. There's ways of achieving the nice looking aspect without, making it like as colorful as possible. What I recommend is, if you have a visual designer in your company, then ask them for a nice color palette. And a decent color palette will really go a long way, without using, just random kind of, harsh, hard colors. You can use just a nice color palette, and you can kind of Google for color palettes, and there's little, nice things that you can get. So that's kind of one way of doing it. And having most of the charts on your screen be the same color if there's no reason to vary them. And if you want to vary them, like a line graph with multiple different lines, or the, plotted on the same space, that's going to have to be different colors, or at least different styles. If you want to show a category of an item across multiple different graphs, one common way to tie those things together is to use color. That's a beneficial way of using it. But I think that what I would advise is try to keep the colors on the muted side rather than the colorful side, because by doing this, you'll be able to, when in the future you do need to add some color in there, now you won't need to go overboard with it. But one of the common problems you find yourself in is that you use a bunch of colors, and then now you need to be able to like flag something as like a warning color or a bad color. But now you've made the whole thing so colorful that nothing stands out anymore. So now you have to go overboard with trying to make things stand out when you're trying to, communicate that something's important. So I would reserve colors for the most part. For flagging is a good way of doing this. And sometimes you can just flag it with an actual glyph that's a different color, or, like a circle, a simple dot next to the things that are problematic. I would advise folks to resist the stoplight model. Yes, it comes so naturally, doesn't it? Right? Because we all we all we know what it means off the bat, right? We know red is bad, green is good, and that's the one benefit that it gets. There's a couple of problems with it. The first one, of course, is the color blindness, right? So the red green color blindness, you've got about 10% of men, 1% of women or so who can't see the difference between red and green. And then you also have this other problem that as soon as you choose the red, yellow, green paradigm, you're unwittingly committing yourself to a color system where hot colors imply bad and cool colors imply good. And while you can do that in a certain limited standpoint, you don't want to necessarily tie yourself to that. You might have some other visual on the screen that calls for the use of lots of colors, including green or including some kind of orange or something like that. So I think high level, careful with the use of colors, use it sparingly. You don't need it to make things look good. In general, resist the red, yellow, green because it's problematic. And use colors to benefit and promote categories usually when you can.
Yeah, I love all those tips actually. And a couple of key points I just want to circle back on is, I think I totally agree. Keeping colors as simple as possible. This is something that we continue to hammer on about. To be honest, like every time I see a report or anything that has colors that are not in a similar theme, I instantly think that the analysis is no good. Instantly, no matter what the analysis is. So I just don't like,
Absolutely.
Whenever you look at like apps on mobile or iPads or good websites, I mean, you just don't see this like fantastical grouping of colors, right? It's like always on theme. And that's what you've got to do, even if you're just building like reports, right? Dashboards. Like you've got to make sure your theme and your colors are simple and very much aligned. Like that is one of the key things.
Absolutely. And I think we're actually fortunate, Sam, nowadays, because we are in an age where flat design, a little bit of subdued thing, because you're exactly right. If you use a nice looking app on your phone, it's not trying to be like as colorful as possible everywhere. It uses kind of more subdued, softer tones. I think that blue that's right on the wall behind you, that kind of lighter blue. I've done dashboards where like almost everything was like in that blue, and it looks beautiful. Yeah. Right. And it's kind of just it looked like really sleek and stuff. And then now when you have to use another color, now it actually stands out. I'll put something like a red dot next to like the problematic items, and it stands out perfectly because you didn't go overboard with it. So agree completely.
Yeah. Like one of my favorite things to do when I'm developing something is I like to, whenever I create a theme, I actually create it just in one color, but just in different shades. And then I make the darker shades. They're the ones that sort of make things stand out. And I think that sort of flows nicely onto, I love this concept of signal versus noise. It's not something that I've actually had explained to me before, but I think it really aligns well with the color idea, right? Like it's like use colors to showcase the signals rather than just random noise on your report. And I think that's a nice framework, really good framework.
Exactly. I think we probably should use that kind of description more often, right? Because it's objective. It gets us away from like, well, I don't like this ridiculous thing with lots of colors. It's signal and noise. What are those colors mapping onto in terms of meaning? Does it mean anything? Because you're forcing the user to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. No, those are some great thoughts. My other question around UX design for you is, we have this concept of, we call it like grid patterns. Like every time or that I've seen a dashboard I really like, or that others in our sort of expert group in terms of judging think a dashboard looks good, is usually when someone's using grid patterns, or their dashboard is based around grids on their report. They might not be like complete, like obvious grids, but they are sort of molded around a grid. Like you might have like your navigation bar, then you might have a small grid with some visualizations in another square grid in another area in your report. So I wanted to get your sort of thoughts on that, and if that aligns with how you like to design things as well.
Yeah, and so grid systems are always good, and sometimes it can be hard to stick to them, because when you're designing a dashboard from scratch, a lot of times you don't know from the jump what you're going to do, and it's not maybe as easy as doing it for a website where you say like, okay, we're going to use the 12 grid system, and then these are the gutters and these are the padding and all of that stuff. But it's very beneficial because it adds a layer of polish and a layer of visual consistency and trust. You mentioned something earlier that like if a screen looks a certain way, you start doubting it. You're like, is this even a reliable source of data? Because if you got this and this wrong, maybe you've gotten a lot of other things wrong. And a big part of communicating data is trust. And so adding that kind of finishing polish to it is always helpful, especially if you're trying to gain traction with data visualizations that you're rolling out. It helps to have, understanding the grids system in visual design. That's kind of sophisticated. And I haven't known that many kind of, business analysts, customer support engineers, and things like that who get into that level of quality. But I think if you have time to concern, to take that into account, then it's beneficial for sure.
Yeah, I think you've got a much deeper knowledge of the system around grids. I think we just try and simplify it and say like, try and imagine grids, like certain grids on your report, whether you actually outline them with lines or whether you just, because the worst thing I think you can do from a UX or UI perspective is just have charts just everywhere, right? And so you want that alignment. You want alignment. And so just thinking in grids, thinking about, okay, here's a grid, here's a grid, here's a grid, here's my navigation, that's in a grid. That's a good way to think about it.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying, because I jumped into the more complex interpretation of that from the visual design where you get all crazy with the, yes, but no, 100% agree. And everybody can at least do that. So, so the way this might come together is having the, widgets be the same size or like an obvious multiple. So like this could be a third of the screen. This one is like 2/3 of the screen, this widget, right? And then this chart up the door, this table on the bottom is like the full screen. And then on the next rep, it's like third. Or if you want to go fourth, have them the same. Yeah. And because you're right, nothing's worse than just like randomly just
misaligned.
Yeah.
Misaligned visualization.
Yeah.
It's such a minor detail, but it ruins the experience. It absolutely ruins the engagement for the consumer. So that's sort of our simple framework that we suggest. Hey, just try and think in grids, and then that will automatically improve your alignment and the spacing and the visual aspect of your report.
I think that's a terrific point, especially if you're putting all the work into it to do this, difficult dashboard. Put the final polish on it, make sure it looks decent with the gridding system. So yeah.
Nice. No, that's good. I'm glad you agree on that one.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything that I might not have sort of brought up or mentioned that you think is important around UX design, or something that you really, or some ideas that you really try to get across to your customers and the companies that you deal with?
Yeah, I think, it's, aside from the overarching point of communication, on the flip side, so I talk a lot from the design thinking kind of aspect of things. There's also what I sometimes call the data thinking side of things. And what I mean by that is, um, not everybody has a statistics background or so, but it helps to know a little bit about that stuff. A little bit about like descriptive statistics and kind of what metrics are useful, because statistics kind of has already figured out what types of things tend to be meaningful. And so, and a lot of times it doesn't coincide with what data is being collected. So I'll give you an example. Um, a lot of startups that I work with, they will collect metrics from the jump they build their tool to log data. One of the common things that I see is logging metrics so that it's like just a cumulative, an ever cumulative metric. So to give you an example, let's say you're logging how many people how many people visit our webpage, right? And let's say you're logging that. So far, so good. But the metric that might be actually getting recorded on the back end, it's tallying every new person who ever visits the website. And it's this ever growing number. I see that kind of thing a lot and there's nothing wrong with engineers, you're trying to build a product and get it off the ground. But a lot of times you'll see stuff that's just like a simple logging of data, but, especially in the early stages of things. And one of the things that you might have to do way before you even get to the data visualization step is early data thinking of what are new metrics that we actually have enough data to produce them. We just have to compute it. Sometimes it's more of an engineering effort, right? Sometimes you have to stand up a microservice that measures this or stores that. And sometimes it's more complex than it sounds. But a lot of times you want to at least have on your radar, instead of having just this ever accumulating metric, let's take, a per day metric and just compute that and do a 24-hour thing and then just divide one number by another. And it's not, and all of a sudden now you have something that's more useful on the back end to work with. Because a lot of times when we are trying to display and communicate data, we're, as you know, limited by what the data that we have, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes helping out a little bit with that data thinking in the beginning of what types of data might be useful to have handy so that it'll be easier to communicate things. And then later as the second step, doing kind of the design thinking stuff. So that's another nugget I would throw out there as well as a little item to think about.
Yeah, no, look, and that's very relevant to even your everyday data analyst as well. Maybe not as it's just one aspect of many, I think, but definitely the sort of data engineering. It's almost like data engineering piece, right? Like
Right.
Having that as something in your toolbox, so that if you want to enhance your insights, you've got the you haven't just got a hammer. You've got a whole you've got a whole lot of tools that you can pull from to make that possible.
Exactly.
What is I guess maybe my final question to you. What are some modern design ideas that or trends that have come up in recent years? Do you think are worthy of learning or implementing? What are some things that you think have changed around design that are more relevant now than they were, say, 3 to 5 years ago, that we should all be adjusting our visualizations around?
So one of the things is flat design. I mentioned this one earlier, but it's really, really key because it gets rid of automatically a whole class of problems that Edward Tupy used to write about a lot in the 80s, chart junk. and data ink ratio, where the obsession was decorating everything. In visualization, it would show up as skeuomorphism on objects and graphs. It's fun to do, but you can resist it in flat design, where things aren't necessarily purely flat, but like they're treated as like sheets. Google Material does a lot of good insights around this. And I think another thing that's kind of appeared is through mobile design in the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, has forced us to think in terms of designing responsively. And as a result, with that kind of for free, we've gotten a lot of the grid stuff that you pointed out earlier, automatically to make something go from desktop to tablet to phone. A lot of times what it's just doing is it's just doing something with the columns and you're just stacking things. So that kind of grid awareness, flat design, I think those are positive developments. And I think that as data discovery tools are becoming more prevalent, I've kind of noticed a lot of the graphs are getting a little bit more responsible over the years. Like you don't see gauge charts as often as you used to a long time ago. They're kind of like out of style. And I think that's a positive development where it's more about like, okay, let's make things look slick rather than fancy. And then there's still a ways to go because there's chart types, Sankey charts and things like that look really, really cool, but are very difficult to interpret, or pie graphs where pie graphs period, but where you have all of the slices are different shades of the same hue, and it looks really nice, but it's really hard to tell which slice is which when you're reading that kind of thing. So I think that a lot of things have stylistically gotten a little bit better with the rise of material design impacting everyone's thinking and some of those other items as well. So
those are some really, really good tips. And yeah, I agree. I cannot stand pretty much all those charts you just described. My philosophy is just keep it simple, man. Just keep it simple. And, that's usually what the consumer wants as well. You can usually, unless it's some edge case, you can usually just get away with some standard visualizations and just using a good color theme, using a good styling, good clear labeling, grid patterns, that you can usually create something very compelling with just that. Don't overcomplicate it. So
that's right.
It's what I suggest. There is times for those more advanced visualizations, but they are.
That's right. Rare. Yes. Save it for those super advanced situations where you really need it. But a lot of the things we learn in UX is you really should only innovate where you kind of have to innovate. Everything else, be boring, because it won't be boring to the user because your data is relevant to the user. So that's another point I would probably also leave, which is if you don't want to bore your users, think more about relevance and less about fanciness and flashiness. Because if something is relevant to people, it's more likely to resonate with them.
Yeah, I agree. Well, one of the key points that I just sort of latch onto off the back of what you mentioned is I feel like the bar has been raised, right? I feel like the bar around visualization has raised so much in recent years with this proliferation of visualization tools, but also just design features and design applications that you can access readily online these days. And so the quality, the best of the best is more readily visible. You can see it out there online much easier. It's easier to collect ideas and etc. And then what that has done is just elevated the bar for everyone, right? And so I think you've got to follow along. You've got to be as good as these as quickly as you can.
I've definitely seen it in my teaching this for the past 10 years or so. The bar definitely has been raised. The kinds of examples I would use in my courses 10 years ago, I had to spend so much more time convincing folks about which charts don't work. but now it's constrained to where there still is a lot of data malpractice out there, but it's at least constrained. It's at least constrained within a certain zone.
It's almost as bad as medical. It's almost as bad as medical.
Almost that's medical malpractice. That's right.
Cool. Okay. Well, look, Thomas, I really appreciate all your insights. Do you want to maybe to give yourself a bit of a plug and suggest how people can find you and maybe some other things about what you can do to and what you do to help people?
Yeah, sure. Finding me fairly straightforward. Thomas Watkins. You can find me at LinkedIn. My social, Twitter and Instagram, I don't use. Instagram a little bit, but at 3Leaf Method, 3, the number 3, then Leaf Method, and then website 3leaf.consulting.
Nice, cool. And like, what would be sort of your ideal customer if someone was interested in catching up?
My ideal customer is anyone who's building something new or is doing data transformation. So if you've got a good idea, something that you're trying to manifest into the world, either you're at a big company building a next gen, or you're a smaller company trying to take your dream and you need a UX team to say, this is how we can help you materialize that from a design perspective and translate your vision into something that can be built. That is an ideal customer. And as well, if you need to have any complex data viz needs or anything like that, that is also a area of expertise for us.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks, Thomas. Thanks for jumping.
Thank you for having me.
And for your insights. Really valuable stuff, and enjoyed just chatting away and
Absolutely.
your experiences.
Thank you. Likewise.
Cool. Okay, let's wrap up. Thanks all. Thanks for tuning in to the Analytic Mind podcast, and look forward to getting more content out to you very soon. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you.